bringing you up to date on all the action from a busy weekend of women's soccer. This is USL Super League Game Week on SiriusXM FC.
Welcome into USL Super League Game Week, joined as always by Marion Crowder. I'm Anna Witte. Every single week, we will be taking a deep dive into the Super League. We'll be talking with coaches and players, and of course, chatting about the latest news. Today, we've got a lot because a new name is coming for the Super League, plus plenty of news and notes across the league as we get closer to playoffs. And we are going to preview week 30 with a full slate of games. Marion, we've got a lot on our plate to get to, a lot of really exciting news, but any personal exciting news for you happening of late? What's going on?
Well, people better not get used to this background, right? We're moving. Who knows where I'll be? That's why I have this handy dandy. You're going to see, and it hasn't needed to come in handy yet, but we have this handy dandy microphone, a little bitty travel guy that when we start moving and boxes are everywhere and who knows what the office backdrop's going to look like, at least you can still hear me. I want an update on your gardening. That's what I want an update on.
You know, I've built my garden bed. I have everything exactly where I want it to be. And now Sunday, hold me to it. I'm going to plant everything. So I have tomatoes, I have lettuce, I think I have cucumbers, and I'm going to do some basil and some different herbs. I still have to go out and buy some seeds, but I'm excited. I think we were supposed to wait until like it was done getting cold outside and then you plant everything, wait for the summer showers. So I'm going to have some fresh veggies.
I am feeling that there is like a fresh margarita pizza in your future, like freshly grown tomatoes, freshly grown basil.
I'm here for it. Hey, I have the sourdough, so I can do the freshly baked pizza crust.
God, my little Martha Stewart.
Come to my house, Marion.
Martha Stewart.
You'll be closer to me now after.
I know.
So and maybe I'll convince you to have your own garden as well. We'll see.
Probably not.
You know, we'll get there. Well, we're going to get to what's huge across USL Super League. If you haven't seen the announcement that dropped yesterday, the USL and Gainbridge announced that Gainbridge will be the first ever entitlement partner of a pro soccer league in the United States as part of a long-term partnership. President of USL Super League, Amanda Vandervoort, went on to say, "This is a landmark moment for pro soccer. Gainbridge's belief and investment in what we're building demonstrates a long-term commitment to the success of professional women's soccer and will help elevate our league, clubs, players, and communities by driving resources, expanding visibility, and creating lasting opportunities for growth. This partnership reinforces that women's sports are thriving and deserve an investment at the highest level." And some background on Gainbridge: it's an insurance agency that empowers consumers to take control of their financial future. That last part, Marion, that Vandervoort added was the partnership reinforces women's sports are thriving and deserve investment, speaks to everything because women's sports are thriving. This is the time to invest, and this is an opportunity for the Super League to take on a company, an entitlement partnership, and continue to grow financially, but also on this global scale.
Yeah, I think one of the things it speaks to the most, right, is when you look at who's involved with Gainbridge, and Brianna Scurry is the one that comes straight to mind, and a former player, obviously former Olympian, who has spoken openly about her financial, struggles post a career-ending, upending concussion, right? And having to pawn off her medals and having really no understanding of financial literacy. And so what a partnership that presents. And she's just been so open and so candid that not only can they use this platform, Gainbridge, as a way to provide financial stability, right? Which also provides freedom to be able to grow into different markets. But it's also a very grassroots element to this partnership that I think lines up very well with the Super League, because people, I don't know about you, but I felt like even when I was a trialist in the pro leagues, there was something taboo about talking about your life after soccer, right? Like you were almost going to speak it into existence before it even happened. And Brian Scurry is saying, that's not the case. I wish someone would have talked to me about this. I wish someone would have given me a platform and a partnership to be able to understand about these things outside of soccer to make my life better and be able to give back. And so I love not only the overarching theme that it represents, right? Because everyone who's like, oh, we've never done this, no one's ever sold the league's rights. You're right. It's historic. But if you look at Europe, right, it is a very common thing. Think about the Barclays Women's Super League.
Right.
So there's nothing kind of out of the ordinary here. It's a historic moment in U.S. Professional sports. It's a historic moment in women's sports. So we've got that overarching theme that I love so much, but we've also got a very individualistic grassroots type of partnership that I think can go on here, that I'm really excited for the players' perspective on.
Gainbridge named former U.S. Women's National Team goalkeeper Bryce Scurry as part of an ambassador earlier this month. And also other ambassadors that Gainbridge has taken on is, WNBA player Caitlin Clark, former professional tennis player, and one of the biggest advocates for women's sports, Billie Jean King. And even other comparisons like the NBA G League used to be the development league, but the sponsorship of Gatorade turned it into the NBA G League. And not only does it bring financial maybe stability for the Super League and its growth, but also for the players in the Super League to have somebody to go to and ask questions to, rather they have a ton of money or don't have any money, and how are they going to invest it further in their lives. I think having a financial partnership is so cool because it provides a resource for people to go to and ask questions. And then of course for the league continue to grow.
Yeah, and look, I think that again, sometimes there's okay, well, why do you need a financial partner, right? You have people who are looking at this from all different kinds of perspectives, but I also want to point out the fact that USL Super League, Gainbridge Super League now, has been the epitome so far in its year of existence of being a trailblazer, right? Think about what it did in not having a draft and the setup of its schedule. There have been firsts throughout this league in its entirety. Not only does this partnership mark another one, but it's setting us up to be able to continue doing that. And I think about the landscape right now of just soccer in the United States, right? Especially given all of the world events that are coming to the States in the next handful of years. The landscape will change. It will continue to need to see new heights. Really, if we're being as honest as we can be, most of the time, the only way to position yourself in a position to take advantage of being the first trailblazing these new additives, these new features, these new, whatever you want to call them, partnerships, you have to have the financial freedom to be able to do so as a league. So not only do I think it's going to do really well for the present part of Super League, but I think from a future perspective, it's going to continue to set this league up to be able to continue being the first to take whatever the next step is.
The first to take a lot of steps. You had mentioned it, the no draft, the no salary cap for Super League, this fantastic European style schedule. You also look at some of the stats that I was reading about Gainbridge. They invest more than 40% of its sponsorship dollars in accelerating the growth of women's sports. So there's definitely this emphasis on the growth of the women's game, no matter what sport you're playing. And that's really cool that, President Amanda Vandervoort and her team were able to make this happen for the Super League. It is still the USL Super League until the end of the season. So watching game week this season, we will call it USL Super League, but starting August, it will be the Gainbridge Super League, and we will take it from there. So just a huge congratulations also to the USL, because in that press release, they had mentioned that the USL will also benefit from this partnership, not just the Super League specifically.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously everyone has heard, if you pay attention at all to soccer in the United States, you've heard that USL as a whole has gone into new heights, especially on the men's side, right? Creating not only their own Division I men's side, but accepting promotion and relegation. And there's no doubt about it that in order to do promotion and relegation right, you need to have financial stability. You need to be able to support the individual clubs and the infrastructure that it takes to be able to successfully handle promotion relegation. But I do want to make something clear, right? Because this is USL as a whole, men's and women's. They are very much about a grassroots type of community, right? Building local partnerships, having a local market. That's not changing with this. This partnership is for the league as a whole. There are still freedom within the local markets to be able to tap into everything that they're already doing. So sometimes I think people get worried when they see these big naming rights come in. They're like, are they going to tell us how to operate all of our businesses? Are they going to take away the local partnerships? No, right? This is operating at the highest level for the league, which is only going to help the local markets ultimately because it's going to provide a bigger platform, hopefully, for the league to continue to grow.
Totally. So really excited for Super League and this big naming right. Gainbridge Super League, congratulations to the entire USL, to the Super League and making this happen. I know this was a labor of love to make this happen. So we are so excited for what this is going to do for the young women in this league and for the growth of women's sports. Well, we've got plenty less left to chat about because there's a lot happening in the Super League with the playoffs looming over us just a few weeks away. Make sure to stay with us here on Game Week on Sirius XM.
Bringing you up to date on all the action from a busy weekend of women's soccer. This is USL Super League Game Week on Sirius XM FC.
Welcome back to Game Week on Sirius XM. Let's take care of some news and notes across the league, starting with some news that we weren't able to address last week because it was announced right after we were done recording the show that Brooklyn fired their head coach, Jess Silva. Brooklyn went 9-2-3 in the fall. Now in the spring, they're 0-5-5, 4 goals for in the spring and 22 goals against, a completely different side than we saw in the fall, Marion. But we're looking at a Brooklyn team that has 4 games left in the spring season. How do you make of this decision right now to move on from their head coach?
It's very interesting move for me. And I just want to, same thing that we did with Fred Briand, right? I just want to lay out exactly the picture, the holistic picture that we see with this club right now. This is a club that has faced several obstacles, okay, in their opening season of USL Super League. The men were supposed to start play this year. That didn't happen. That got postponed. Stadium wasn't done in time, right? Their home opener got postponed for several weeks. They had to play at Columbia University as an interim park with interim facilities, granted, very, very nice facilities, right? Beautiful backdrop. And now their home stadium of Maimonides Park is a further commute for the players. It is questionably a less quality pitch than where they were playing at Columbia University because it's a converted baseball field shared by a minor league team. They started the season with an interim coach. Jess Silva did not get there until the end of September, right? So really only been there about 6 months. And they are likely going to finish the season with an interim, potentially. Their sporting director right now is actually standing in as a head coach. So there is a potential for this team to have 4 head coaches in the span of 1 season. That being said, Anna, you did a phenomenal job of laying out exactly what the story has been for them this spring. It's been questionable in terms of the lineup decisions. It's been questionable in terms of the effort. And I think the overarching question for everyone as just a casual observer is the locker room behind Jess Silva? And I think that's a very fair question to ask. I think we never saw a response to the 3-game struggle that has ultimately turned into a spiral that none of us are sure that they're going to get out of in terms of making a playoff position. That being said, we can only really speculate the full decision to part ways with Jess Silva. But the thought that you are going to get more out of a potential sporting director or out of a potential interim head coach with 4 matches left in the season, when you still have a very likely playoff spot waiting for you, that's a bold thought for me.
Yeah. And it's also important to note, too, that Brooklyn sporting director and Kevin Tinio is both the men's and women's side of the game. So not always that specific emphasis on the women's side. Look, I mean, Brooklyn lost their goal scorer in forward Isabel Cox.
That was tough.
That was tough for this Brooklyn side. There are so many things that were stacked up against Brooklyn, but they were able to really follow through on getting 9 wins in the fall season. It hasn't been the spring that they had wanted, but they are going to push through with only 4 games left in this season, starting this weekend with a match against DC. Let's move to Dallas with some major news out of Dallas. It was reported that forward Lexi Missimo was out for the rest of the season with a ligament injury to her foot, which was surgically repaired. She is expected to resume soccer activities in 2 months and be fully recovered by the start of next season. This is a huge loss to not just the Super League, but also to Dallas. Missimo was a huge signing in the spring, coming to Dallas, being a goal scorer for this side. So how does Missimo's loss impact Dallas in this playoff push in their last 5 games?
What a good question. And I'm actually going to kind of phrase that as in like, can the loss of one player really change the trajectory that I have this Dallas team being top of the table, right? I went on a couple weeks ago and said that
Yeah,
I
you
think that
did,
they're going
finishing
to come
first,
out.
right?
Right. So immediately when I saw that, right, I'm like, am I about to eat my words? Which, I happily will if that happens. Absolutely. But if you're because I know we have many listeners on both the men's and the women's side, they're just USL lovers in general. So the best way that I can describe this is if you are a USL Championship follower, look no further than Sacramento Republic's Rodrigo Lopez, who went out in the beginning of the 2024 season with an ACL tear. They ended up going 8-17 after his departure, after opening with an undefeated 9 outings while he was playing, which included an MLS win over San Jose Earthquake side in the Open Cup. Lexi has the potential to have had that kind of impact, right? I want to be clear. She could have had that kind of impact. However, the way that Pauline McDonald and Chris Petrocelli have built their roster this year, specifically as on the outstretch of the spring season, I don't see that happening for this Dallas side. Actually, I think the biggest player that Lexi's loss affects is probably Cameron Lancaster,
Right.
just because I think that that's who ultimately is going to have to try and step in at that 10 role, where I particularly like Cam as more of a false nine or more of a winger, just given her attributes. But when you look at the addition of Tamara and Deborah Abiodun specifically, I think that is going to end up being the turning point of having such a pivotal midfield that Pauline is going to be able to reconstruct it in a way that they're still going to find chances, and lots of them at that.
Dallas is currently second in the USL Super League standings. And we're also looking at an Allie Thornton, who's in the Dallas attack. She's tied in the Golden Boot race with none other than Carolina's Mia Corbin, who got her 10th goal against Spokane this past weekend. It was funny listening to Corbin before our post-game interview. She's like, 10 goals was the number. That was my goal with Coach Poole that I wanted to hit this season. And I know, Marion, she's a player that you have kind of circled as an MVP. And I don't condone that pick. I think that's a fantastic pick. We're looking at a Carolina side who has 16 goals, 5 straight clean sheets. What excites you the most about Mia Corbin and what she could do for Carolina down this final stretch?
Yeah, it was great. When I was watching that game back, I literally thought to myself, I said, are we watching Mia Corbin turn into the best player in the Super League, like the most complete player? And I thought about it and I thought about it and I watched her for a few more chances, and it's yes. Yes, for me, Mia Corbin is the most complete player in the USL Super League right now. You mentioned it, right? Carolina's got the stats. She's got the stats as an individual.
Yep.
That absolutely plays a part in an MVP type of discussion. But when I look at how complete she is as an attacker, she's got the physical attributes, she's got the vision, she's got the technical ability and the creativity, no doubt about that. But it's her game understanding. And for me specifically, she is the hardest person for any team to replace on the field. You look at Tash Flint, right? You look at some of those comparables, maybe Allie Thornton on the Dallas side. We just talked about Lexi, right? But Mia Corbin is that player that if you take her off the pitch, I think in any given situation, I'm not sure you have some of the same outcomes. So I think ultimately Carolina is playing their best football right now, and that is a scary, scary thought. And so her ability to be that two-way player for them, which Carolina is a team who gets so much credit on the attacking side of the field, but so much of what they do well and what creates them opportunities in the attack is their defensive presence, and particularly the defensive work rate of their attackers. And Mia Corbin is the one that's leading that charge.
Carolina is a side that has a ton of depth, and it's shown with the loss of Vicky Bruce, with the loss of Riley Bass in these last few games, and even Giovanna DeMarco, who's been out for a while, and they've still been able to prove that they can not only hang, but score and become a team that can really stand apart from everybody at the top of the table. This Mia Corbin, I think you named it perfectly. Like, she's a two-way player. Not only is she getting the job on the offensive piece, she's connecting all the passes through the midfield, but Corbin does the defensive work. And that's such a selfless player that Corbin is. She's a player who wants to win, and she knows that she has to do the job all over the field in order for Carolina to get these consistent results. So excited for Corbin and that potential MVP that she could lock down here in the next few weeks. We're in a playoff race now, Marion, because it's official that Lexington and DC have been disqualified from that playoff race, and they are officially out. Let's start with Lexington because
Okay.
this is a side that never really found their footing.
Yep.
They fired their coach. They brought in some interim head coaches. Never really had a consistent roster.
Yep.
Really went in the spring, brought a lot of new pieces in. What's the biggest area that Lexington has to improve in before 25-26?
Got to go out and get some real center backs. Got to have better defensive structure because I think one thing that was so mind blowing to us is seeing, I think there were several players on the attacking front for them that caught us off guard and just how good they were, how efficient they were in front of goal. But it didn't matter because they didn't have the defensive structure to match. And so, number one for me in Lexington, it's going to be defensive structure. I think number two priority for them is going to be a game-changing attacking threat in some capacity. We talked about Madison Parsons, a bit of a surprise for people, but I don't really think we ever saw it evolve into anything else. Witte was a welcome, Hannah Witte was a welcome addition for them, but I think she needs a support cast around her. Kate Doyle, you mentioned, never really found her footing or her rhythm with this team, maybe got in a bit too late. So I think that they need an attacking threat that can change the game, but ultimately both of those asks are a cry for leadership.
Right.
And I never felt like we had the player-led leadership for Lexington.
Also, never had a coach for Lexington who had the leadership piece that was coming from an outside source. I would love to see Lexington bring somebody in who hasn't been a part of this club, did not see what happened this past season, and can come in with a completely blank slate and take over this roster and really build it into something that can compete, because the training facilities are insane. Where Lexington plays is beautiful. There's so much that Lexington has that some teams only wish that they could have. So bringing in a head coach could be exciting for Lexington. DC in a similar spot, out of this playoff race, a lot of young pieces, fire their head coach, bring in an interim head coach, are competing, have some pieces like Gurley who can help them score, but it's done this season. So DC moving forward, what needs to improve there?
On the field, I think they need a 10 and they need a 6. I think they need an attacking midfielder, and I think they need a true holding midfield player who can control and dictate tempo.
Well, how does that impact Katie Duong if you are looking for another 6?
I'm not sure that Katie Duong is your true 6. I think actually Katie Duong could be more of like a box-to-box midfielder because I think that she presents a really interesting threat on the attacking front as well. But with that, right, you're looking for consistency. You brought it with Lexington. The same thing is true for DC. And, they're actually in a really interesting position because they share the pitch, obviously, with DC United, with the Washington Spirit. And so on any given training week, their schedule could be up in the air, right? And as well as I do, one of the best things, especially when you get to that elite level, is having consistency in your schedule, right? You eat at the same time, you train at the same time, your recovery is at the same time. And so it's hard to thrive consistently on the field when you face that inconsistency off of it. And I will even loop it back to that's what we're seeing with Brooklyn right now as well.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, totally agree with that. There's a lot that needs to change with Lexington and DC. We saw some nice bright spots from both clubs, and it is year one. This is the first year of USL Super League. Both these clubs have so much potential, so many good individual play, but excited to see the changes that Lexington and DC make. Well, don't go anywhere.
And they can still play spoiler.
Yeah,
they can still play spoiler.
Totally. Just because they're out of playoffs doesn't mean we're not talking about them anywhere. If you're a fan, don't go anywhere because we still got plenty to discuss. We've got 4 games this upcoming weekend. I cannot believe it is week 30 in the Super League. So don't go anywhere. It is game week on Sirius XM.
Bringing you up to date on all the action from a busy weekend of women's soccer. This is USL Super League Game Week on Sirius XM FC.
Welcome back into Game Week on Sirius XM. We are just a few days ahead of match day 30 in the Super League. 4 games for you. Let's start with Tampa Bay and Spokane Saturday at 5 o'clock. These games will be on Peacock. And then we have DC at Brooklyn Saturday at 6 o'clock. Carolina at Fort Lauderdale Saturday at 7:30. And then Lexington at Dallas to wrap up the weekend Saturday at 8 o'clock. Tampa Bay is 3rd in the standings. Spokane is 6th in the standings, really trying to get into that playoff spot. Tampa Bay is a team where they're coming off a win against DC. They've got 3 players with 7 or more goals this season, and Tampa Bay is healthy, and that healthy piece is so important. So where do you see Tampa Bay's attack being a threat against Spokane on Saturday?
Central spaces, and particularly, I think they have to get the ball out to get in. But you mentioned those incredible playmakers and the fact that they've got multiple players in the hunt for the Golden Boot race. I mean, truly,
Yeah.
all of those players really are in the spine of their structure offensively. And so I think for Spokane, one of the things that I felt like they did so well in this spring season was actually pinning teams up against one particular sideline and really denying that opposition swing. And I think that's actually one of the places that Tampa Bay thrives. So it will be an interesting cat and mouse game because you and I were talking off air, right? It never felt like, and granted, Spokane was on a very short rest period when they played Carolina. So they'll be fresh again. But I felt like in that Carolina match, they never really inserted themselves defensively. And so much of what they have done well this spring season is being in your face, heavy pressure, and forcing you into areas of the field that you're uncomfortable with. They never really did that for Carolina. I felt like they really let Carolina grow into the match and kind of rip them apart in a multitude of ways. If they can come out and assert themselves defensively first and foremost, and keep Tampa Bay pinned to the initial side that they play on, I think that's where they'll find success. Where they're going to struggle, because Tampa Bay is so good, is if they allow their holding midfielders to get the ball, swing it to the other side, and then you've got kind of that up the spine and the opposing winger available, and that's a problem.
One big piece of Spokane's defense out wide is Bourgeois. She was phenomenal
Good.
against Carolina's Audrey Harding. And I think that's where Spokane can continue to build. They're playing with confidence. This is a Spokane side that will be back at home against Tampa Bay, and that's huge for a team across the country, but only one shot on target against Carolina, having Allie Cook in that system. Where can Spokane be a little bit more effective with their goal scoring opportunities?
Yeah, it never felt like they tried to impose their will, right? We talked about that on the defensive side, but also from an attacking perspective. One of our critiques of this Spokane side in the spring season or in the fall season was the fact that it was really predictable. Just trying to get the ball to Amina Ekic, just trying to serve it across and hope for something dangerous to happen. And that's where I felt like we were again in that game versus Carolina. So I think we need to see a little bit more involvement from their central midfielders at first to be able to find isolation in a better place for Amina Ekic, because there is an obvious connection between Amina and Allie Cook that didn't come to fruition in that Carolina game, but is something I think that they're going to look to target against Tampa Bay for sure.
Carolina at Fort Lauderdale is going to be a huge one. Carolina is 6 points ahead of Dallas in the standings with 15 different goal scorers this season. 4 games left for Carolina. Where do you see Carolina making the difference in these last 5 games? What's been the difference maker for them?
Mentality. Well, honestly, it's been their mentality, but it's been their collective effort defensively. I wish that we would all stop talking about what they're doing on the attacking side of the ball. It's great. I love it. Thank you so much. But it's really their defensive organization and not just shape, right? It's rotation within their shape. It's the shadow pressure that they're getting, the intelligence of the different personnel types they have and the different types of pressure those personnel types will present. And sometimes it's a midline of confrontation. Sometimes they're good absorbing pressure. So it's really just been that mentality that we want to host. You can tell that that's first and foremost in their minds, but it's really come to fruition in the 90 minutes by their collective effort defensively.
There's this constant movement of if a player comes out of their space to defend someone, there's somebody filling that gap. Everybody on the field understands the game of soccer and the way that Poole wants to play, and it's evident. Carolina's going up against Fort Lauderdale, who has really shocked us. Fort Lauderdale has not seen a win since March 15th, and that was 4 games ago, Marion. In 4th place, Fort Lauderdale still in this playoff run, but what will it take for Fort Lauderdale to get over this slump?
They're making me mad, first and foremost.
I know. I had them finishing number 1.
I know that it's there. I know that it's there. I know that it's there. You know it's there. We all know it's there, right? So what is it? Well, if you look at really their best opportunities, if they score some of those early ones in that Dallas match, it's a different ball game, okay? So for me, it's one thing, and it's very simple. Timing of their runs in the 18-yard box. You clean that up, I think you score 3-4 more goals in your last 2 matches. And it's a different storyline.
A lot of games on Peacock this weekend. Tune into all of them. There's a lot of excitement. All these teams have 4 to 6 games left before we hit the playoffs. Well, thank you so much for joining us this week on USL Super League Game Week. You can catch us every single Wednesday, either on the SiriusXM app or on USL YouTube page. We will see you next week. Enjoy all these games and enjoy your weekend.
You've been listening to USL Super League Game Week on SiriusXM FC.